Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up NASCAR Cup Series Firekeepers Casino 400 at Michigan, MotoGP, the Aragon Grand Prix, Supercar Series, 3 races at Perth, plus World Rally Championship Rally Town in Italy, Sidonia. I'm Joe Samdiego. With me, we got Kobe Lameth from Grid Tonight and Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com. A big thank you to our Patreon investors. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Link in the video description. Also, we accept Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chats. If you're not watching us live, YouTube Super Thanks. We'll thank you on the air the next time or while we're on the air right here on the Grid Network. And of course, the simplest way to support us, visit our website. I know, Matthew, you've been working really hard on the recap for Michigan. That'll be up on GridNetworkTV.com, as well as all the updates, including show clips, and of course across social media at Grid Network TV, GridNetworkTV.com, our website. So actually, let's get started with the NASCAR Cup Series. Yesterday, Jonathan Field from the RacingExperts.com, and I hit several points, and as the race was progressing, I was like, man, all these things we talked about were occurring. One of the several points we talked about included Chevrolet's drought on Michigan. That drought's continuing on because Toyota, last year they snapped a 4th winning streak here on Michigan. Well, they made it 2 in a row, but this time with Denny Hamlin, the owner of 2311, who won last year with True Tyler Reddick. Denny Hamlin goes to victory lane. He outdueled William Byron with those final few laps, taking the lead with 5 laps to go. And that was a really fun race. Just seeing how he was positioning the car from the side drafting, trying to get the dirty air. And then at the end of the day, he just put himself in a position where Byron had to lift off on the gas. This is his 3rd race win of the year. His racecraft just seems to be on another level. Do you believe he's going to get a 4th win before the playoffs, Denny Hamlin?
I can't say I can guarantee it, but I'd be pretty dang close to saying that he probably so. I mean, I can't say that this is Denny Hamlin's best year, right? Because obviously he's had years where he's won 7 or more races. In fact, this is his 9th year in his NASCAR Cup Series career where he has 3 or more wins in a season. And he's already done it, and we're not even halfway through the season. And it's just something about Denny Hamlin and this team and the momentum that they've had is in the racecraft, like you mentioned, Joe, it feels like it's really on another level. However, you can argue that I think William Byron is also on another level. And I think without another performance like this with Byron, where something goes wrong at the end, he would be leaps and bounds ahead in the standings. But just to talk on Hamlin, I mean, he's got a lot going on. And I think even they mentioned it on the Amazon Prime Video broadcast when they asked him, it's like, he's got a baby on the way, wishing Jordan Fish and him the best for their first baby boy together, as he's due anytime, maybe in a couple days, so he can be on the 11th. I know he joked about that on his Actions Detrimental podcast, wanting it to be like a reasonable NASCAR number, right? But in terms of like just the racecraft too, and then all the stuff going on, obviously you've heard, I know Kobe and them, they've touched on it Wednesday, about NASCAR and the whole 2311 lawsuit. Not to really touch a lot on that, but there's a lot going on, and it's definitely going to affect, I think, Denny Hamlin. I think it's going to affect Michael Jordan, Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, and Riley Herbst, especially just the mental aspect. I know I've seen some interviews on Front Stretch and stuff, another racing outlet, that they're they're avoiding the question, just saying, hey, it's something just going on, whatever. But Hamlin hit it straight on. He said, it's not even that big of a deal, right? We're just going to go out and keep doing what we're doing. And he showed that. I mean, 2311 today put on a performance, not just talks about him, but Bubba Wallace stayed in the top 10 most of the day in all the stages. I think he ended up with like the 3rd or 4th most points, finishing 4th in today's race. Great bounce back for that team. Tyler Reddick had pit road issues behind Brad Keselowski, came back to finish. I think he was 13th. Even Riley Herbst, he finished 25th. I know that doesn't sound great, but the way Riley Herbst has been running, unfortunately, in that 3rd car for 2311, that is actually a pretty decent day for that team. Kept it off the wall, essentially. But yeah, I think long story short, I apologize, but Hamlin's racecraft, I think, is on another level, and the confidence factor that I have in Hamlin to be a championship Ford driver couple of years ago, I said he was going to win the championship. Unfortunately, as you know, it has never worked out in his career. But I think this could be a year where you can start counting on 11 to beat your favorite driver at Phoenix.
Yeah, his racecraft is really looking good. I just feel he just needs to have everything work together. When it gets a little too chaotic, that's where it seems to stumble a little bit. In the chat room, we got Chuck joining us. He's talking about masterclass by Hamlin and no duo better to walk us through the fuel aspect in the race than Steve Letarte and Dale Earnhardt Jr. I gotta say, one of the big things was those two talking about the fuel strategy, and I really like what they call sort of the burn bar, but also the telemetry of the pedal from Hamlin, Byron, Hocevar, which we'll talk about, really added to it. Also, Nicholas, I don't like Denny Hamlin. I wish Chris Buescher should have won that. Chris Buescher, second place finish. I mean, good day for RFK Racing. All three cars in the top 10. That has to feel pretty good. And of course, results are officials. No issues with tech. So official results right there. And unfortunately for Carson Hocevar, the results is not showing the day he had. He was running up front again, leading late. We know fuel was going to be an issue. So I was really curious to see what would happen. But a flat tire this time. Left rear tire came down on him, took him out of the race win. So he made that pit stop for the fuel, the tires, but of course, just not a factor for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, he was just out of it. And considering that Coca-Cola 600, very fast car, the engine blew. Nothing went wrong last race weekend, second place finish. This time, a tire goes down. We know when it comes to air pressures, the team tries to work that. And we know Spire just seems to have this luck where they're just missing something to get that top 10, top 5 finish on a consistent base. With such a good finish gone, do you start to doubt if maybe Spire can put together that perfect race to help Hocevar earn a win this year?
Surprisingly, I honestly think they are in the right place to get it done. But it is kind of drastic, the difference from what we've seen from Hocevar versus like Justin Haley. Even Michael McDowell, too. Michael McDowell's actually kind of a lot closer in the standings. He's 23rd right now. He has 285 points. Justin Haley's 29th in the standings with the Spire. Obviously, they traded for him. Then he signed an extension. So he's not doing too hot, but Hocevar's sitting 18th. So I think Hocevar is really embracing that number one driver role on that team. And I think a lot of people saw it in trucks with Nice. I know a lot of people talk about his actions on the track, and I feel it's a lot similar to what we saw with Ross Chastain. Even though Ross Chastain was already a seasoned veteran, I think by the time he started getting up towards the front, I mean, he worked his way. That's a guy who drives everything and really earned his spot, just to touch on that. And I know him and Hocevar had a couple issues in that truck race. I know we'll talk about it on Monday with Ben and Brandon. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think they can put together a win. I really do. And it's interesting because I know we mentioned, I don't know if we touched on Ty Gibbs, but I'm starting to wonder if Hocevar is going to get his first career win before Gibbs. And I think Gibbs is a team leap and bounds ahead of Spire. No offense to Spire, but it's just crazy to see what's been going on. And I think it's all a crew chief maybe issue with all that going on. And I think Hocevar is in honestly the best situation he can be in at this current moment. And the guy is a great race car driver. You look at it, he's 22. Keep in mind, he's only 22. I mean, it's not like he's some sort of seasoned veteran. He's a 22-year-old driver. He has 2 runner-ups already this season. He only has 3 top 10s, however. But if you really look at Joe, like you mentioned, with all the issues been going on, Hocevar would probably be in the top 15 or 14 in points if they could finish out a race. And just, it reminds me a lot, too, of, I think, honestly, I know it's going to sound weird, but Bubba Wallace a couple years ago, I think maybe after his win in 22, I believe. So in like 2023, when they had like almost a down year, it seemed like every time that team would get it going towards the end, like they were going to win, something else would randomly happen, whether it was on pit road. You see it a lot with Ryan Blaney this year. His pit crew's gotten better, but it seems like there's always an outside factor besides the driver that is taking these guys out of contention. Right now, Hocevar, it's that left rear tire, I believe, a couple times, and then obviously the engine a couple times. But yeah, I think they can help put together a win. I think it honestly might be this year. I know we touched on it with Jonathan and Tanner many weeks ago, and I think it's possible.
Anything's possible, especially one racetrack. I think Carson Hocevar could get that win. It's going to be Atlanta. It's a drafting style track. He got second place last time. I think if he has that good race, and that's part of it too, he needs to have a good mistake-free race, because we also know there's drivers like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. that sort of wants to go after him. I think Atlanta is a good one. Another one that we've seen first-time winners before, Pocono Raceway, especially those long green flag runs. It's going to be really interesting to see how those work out. I'm very curious about the road courses. Of course, we got Mexico, Chicago, Sonoma, Watkins Glen. Those are going to be really hard. But then once we look into like Dover, Iowa Speedway, I just don't know if the Spire Motorsports team will have what it takes for a win there. But Carson Hocevar could prove me wrong and see what happens in the chat room. Chuck, agree. Hocevar speed is perplexing. He is close to winning, but so was Gibbs at one point. And I think you brought up a good point about Ty Gibbs, man, where it was he's been struggling at times, but then today we get a race. I was convinced if Hamlin and Byron were going to keep side by side, creating that big pocket of air, Ty Gibbs was going to come in, make that leap in three right with all the momentum and steal a win. Didn't happen, but I mean, if he has a good race, he's got to go for these wins, because I believe he was 27th in the points entering the race weekend. Yeah. He has to get wins, because we're getting down to it when it comes to the playoffs just around the corner. Now, Gibbs, of course, part of Joe Gibbs Racing. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about Chase Briscoe, what he has to do to try to get the win. James Small, if he's a bit on the hot seat for just not having that speed throughout the race. And we also talked about Alex Bowman, particularly with Hocevar, potentially the rumor to replace him. Now, we said before on this show, the unfair label of being the fourth Hendrick Motorsports driver, considering what Bowman has done with that 48 car. Today, though, just add a little fuel to the fire to those rumors, because he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, crashed out. He said in the post-race interview he shouldn't be back there, but of course, they were just struggling all weekend for speed. And this was Bowman's 7th finish of 29 or worse in the last 9 races. So this has been a rough string for him. Yesterday, I asked Jonathan Fields, what would need to happen to see Bowman replaced by Hocevar? And in your opinion, is that likely?
I think to answer the first question, what needs to happen? A lot. And I mean, like, a lot. And in terms of, do I think it's likely? Honestly, does anyone honestly know? Because it's just silly season's one crazy thing. And I don't know how many huge moves we've seen. I know obviously Larson to Hendrick in 2020 was a huge deal, or 2021. But in all honesty, I feel like he was already going to go there regardless of his whole situation. It just seemed like that was the case. So it wasn't as big of a bombshell announcement. But I think anyone replacing an Alex Bowman would be there. And for Hocevar, it's likely no. It's like, I told you guys in the chat, and I've said on every show we mention Alex Bowman, I will defend Alex Bowman, because it is quite an unfair label for him to be the 4th Hendrick Motorsports driver. He is consistently, this year he's back down to, he's had a horrible stretch and he's still 13th in points. I know that might be not tier, but you guys remember at the start of the year, we were talking about when he was, I'm reading off the results, in the first 6-7 races, he was 6th at Daytona, if you ignore Atlanta where an incident happened. He was 9th at Coda. He was 7th at Phoenix, 7th at Vegas, 2nd at Homestead. I mean, why is that replaceable by a guy who only has 60 career starts? I just don't get it. Bowman has 8 wins. He has over 100 top 10 finishes. What more does he have to do? And then when you look at Ally Bank as well, Ally Financial, they've been with Hendrick Motorsports whether it was GMAC, I know I called it GMAC on the last show. Tanner and I were talking, giggling about that. But they've been with Hendrick longer than I've been on this planet. So for me to honestly think that they would let Bowman out to dry to bring in Hocevar, I don't really think that's the case. I think Bowman is doing everything you want out of a driver, except when it comes to playoff time. I know he kind of falls off, but he's won 8 races in the last 4 or 5 years. It's like, I don't on any other team in this sport besides maybe, Penske or Gibbs, that's like number 1 driver. It just so happens to be that he is the 4th driver. And you can argue this year, I know Chase Elliott, it's funny, he's 5th, but he's been the most quiet 5th place guy in the standings in probably the history of this sport, because he has only 3 top 5s. He's just very quiet, but he gets the job done. He finishes races. That's what Alex Bowman needs to do. And I think I'll leave you with this before I throw it back to you on my long tangent. I think there are multiple drivers that would be in the 48 before that, and I think 2 are Xfinity guys. I know we talked about Zilich, but I don't really think that. I think it's going to be a driver that doesn't really need to bring sponsorship, because if you look at Hendrick Motorsports, when's the last time a driver joined Hendrick Motorsports that really needed to bring their own sponsor? You think Exalta or DuPont has been with Byron, they were already with Gordon. You think with Ally, they were already with, even if you go back to Brian Vickers, Casey Mears' time, now Jimmy Johnson, now they're with Bowman. They've been there. It's just like, and then Larson, HendrickCars.com, I don't even have to get into that. But in terms of maybe Chase Elliott, Napa 2015, right? But other than that, he was going to be in that car anyway. So it's like, there's one guy who I think, sorry for the very long point, guys. Listen at home. There's one guy who, he doesn't really bring a lot of his own sponsors, but he is with the team in the NASCAR Xfinity Series that has Whelen as a main sponsor that has been with them for a while, whether they were back with Myatt Snyder or Sheldon Creed. I think Jesse Love would be the favorite, to be honest with you, to get this ride, because Jesse Love has shown he's got a lot of talent, and if RCR does not allow him to move up, when you got Kyle Busch in the 8 for another couple years, you got Austin Dillon, whenever he wants to go, he can go. So where's that room to grow for a young Jesse Love? And I think if they can poach anyone, it would be him. And the 4th place Hendrick Motorsports driver, just so I keep not shutting up, essentially. When's the last time a 4th Hendrick Motorsports driver has performed as well as Bowman really has in his career? Even Dale Jr., when he was the 4th driver, even Casey Kane, they really, there was a huge difference, I honestly feel, with how well they were performing. I mean, we forget that Jr. went on a very, very long streak where he didn't get anything done. And if it wasn't Dale Earnhardt Jr., he probably wouldn't be on that team. But nobody, gosh forbid, they would have that conversation about Dale Jr. that they're having about Alex Bowman right now. So I think unfair treatment, I won't mute myself, but I'll shut up and I'll let you talk. I apologize.
I got to say, it was pretty much, I mean, like you said, he is delivering the results. He just happens to be at Hendrick Motorsports, where now Byron's there to 2029. Kyle Larson's going to be there for a while. And Chase Elliott is the most popular driver. He ain't going to go anywhere. So you just now got one driver where it's easy to put the rumors, especially when you have something like this where poor finishes out your results. It just really comes and started becoming an issue. And I think it is something where it's just the pressure's there. But I just think, I'm glad you brought up Jesse Love, because I've always felt like Hocevar being as disruptive as he is, where he's getting a reputation around the garage area, how he races people, making enemies. I always just felt like Ally, GMAC, Hendrick Motorsports, they never really have a driver like that. They don't want somebody. I mean, Kyle Busch left the team. We saw how a lot has changed. Overall, I just think it's just one of those deals where we're going to be seeing everything, all the rumors, and if Alex Bowman could get a win, especially another win like he did at Chicago, that's what he needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, we talked about disruptors, and I think you make a great point, is that Hendrick Motorsports doesn't seem to tolerate guys that are, quote, disruptors. But however, we were talking with Tanner Smith in chat, what makes Kyle Larson not a disruptor? I mean, he might not get into fights or anything, but if you notice, he steps on his own foot a lot. And when I think we don't treat him the same, is because he wins all the damn time. And it's just, he's like one of the best motorsports people out there in the world. But if you realize there's a lot of checkers or wreckers with that guy, and he's always running into something. So it's like, isn't that considered a disruptor? Right. So it's like, I don't know if you tame. I think Ross Chastain got tamed by Chevrolet. I really do. And I think we're starting to see some great ones. I know there's a great story a few months ago on NASCAR.com about a certain person who wrote that had a great story about how Ross Chastain's really getting back into that shell of who he was. And I think it depends now. If Hocevar tames down and becomes a very driver like Chastain, where he'll move you if he needs to, but he can get it done, then sure, I see it. But in terms of, like you say, drivers who are disruptors, isn't Kyle Larson kind of, I want people to know they're listening, isn't Kyle Larson kind of a disruptor in his own way?
I do feel that he is almost like one of the first drivers Hendrick had, Tim Richmond back in the day. He was pretty much, he was winning it or he was crashing it. I feel the one thing with Kyle Larson, especially 2021, he really showed he could bring good finishes. I mean, overall, he still has, I believe, over 70% top 10 finish rate this year, Kyle Larson. So it's not too extreme. I think if anything more so, it's the fact that you have a driver that is not afraid to give the bumper like an Ernie Irvan back in the early 90s when he was making enemies left and right. People saying he's driving too aggressive. Brad Keselowski, some people were saying that early on in his career. Now here we are, Chastain, Hocevar. It's always something I feel like Hendrick prefers a driver that is a bit more polished. For Ally, that's the thing I keep going back to. Dude, Ally wants somebody like that. It's just one of those deals, but who knows? What if Hendrick is working on another deal with another sponsor that is like, hey, by the way, we like Hocevar, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in silly season in the chat room. Chuck, I can't imagine what it would take for Ally to drop Bowman. Most of the issues have not been his fault, and we got to say, I mean, wrong place, wrong time. The only thing I think somebody could say was, well, he shouldn't be there. He should be up front towards the front, but that's sometimes the way it is with motorsports. Adam, glad to see Alex Bowman walk away from that accident today. Very hard hit. I don't want to imagine what that could have been, 22 years ago when we still had concrete walls there. We know that track, what it did to Ernie Irvan a long time ago. Adam doesn't think Jesse Love to Hendrick Motorsports is a possibility.
That's fair. I'm a lone wolf on that one, I think.
Then Denver, I respect Denny Hamlin, but he needs to start winning consistently on road courses. And I'm surprised that Michigan is not 500-mile race instead of 400 miles. I guess a quick follow-up for you, Matt. We were talking about this was a really good race. Would 500 miles be too long, or would that be something where, okay, let's make it 500 miles? Could be a good show.
I think we're getting to the point where 500 miles is too long for everything. Honestly, Michigan, it's funny. I know we were talking in the chat. It's a great show. This was one of the best shows I think we've seen, but at the same time, I don't know how much more racing I kind of want to see. I think 400 is a great balance, and I can agree. Denny Hamlin's one of those drivers. I think there's probably 3 drivers in the sport that I would take on any given Sunday at all 36 races. Denny Hamlin's on that teeter, right? Because his road course performance has not been the same. So that consistency, like Denver said. But in terms of, I mean, Denny still, it's like he's still beating everyone's favorite driver, I guess. That's the best way to describe it, just with that. But Michigan, I want to hear your opinion as well, Joe. Do you think 400 is long enough? Do you think they need 500? I don't know. I think they need to change when they schedule the event. I know we're going to talk on that with everything coming up.
Yeah, scheduling, that's one thing. This is one of those races I've personally been a fan of for a long time because we do have fuel mileage becomes an issue. You have the wide open grooves to go race around different lines. I mean, it has consistently put on a good show. But what I always felt, and I think this was something Jonathan yesterday from the racing expert brought up, you have those tracks where especially it'll get crazy. Bristol nighttime, especially Old Bristol, Talladega. You have the crown jewels, the Coca-Cola 600, Daytona 500. Some people throw in there the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Brickyard 400. And then it feels like Michigan was a big deal for the manufacturers, everyone with the connection to Detroit. For the fans, it just doesn't really seem to rank up there as like one of the top 5, 6 races annually. It just always seems to be just okay. We're going to Michigan, and then it ends up on cable television, where it is Fox Sports One, USA Network, NBC Sports when they were around. So it's something else. I know it was a good race, and yesterday we asked the question: should Michigan have 2 dates? And we both sort of agree, maybe not. So if it's not, I see it was just going to be a one-time race, 500 miles. Maybe create a trophy or some sort of tradition where it's like, okay, since this is Michigan, home of the city of Detroit, and all this, maybe some sort of incentive, like, okay, there's a some sort of tradition, like, okay, the manufacturer with the most cars in the top 10 has some sort of special trophy or bragging rights, something like that, just to add a little value. Also, in the chat room, Chuck, I'm fine with 400. I get nothing additional out of the longer races that were originally scheduled for this lane as a true test of endurance, but that was a stock based vehicle. I think that he brings up a really good point because we got to remember for the longest time, Texas Motor Speedway was a 500-mile race, and we could all agree it was like, this is too long, and now it's down to 400 miles at Texas Motor Speedway. But the show today, really good race. Like you said, probably one of the best races we've seen at Michigan. Overall, considering where we are with this car, still post race, you saw Ty Gibbs saying passing's hard, but here you have multiple grooves, you have a lot of wide open space, you can make passes. We saw fuel mileage become an issue. William Byron, just on the short side, had to come in and make a pit while some of the others continue on. The restarts, they were the restarts I see you anticipate, 3 or 4 wide. Of course, Bowman's big crash. And I was surprised even some of the crashes like Ryan Blaney spinning out on his own, John Hunter Nemechek. I feel like this race had a little bit of everything. Was this the best Michigan race in recent memory?
I'm going to answer both your questions. One, I mean, I think with recency bias, you can say yes, because when you look at it, what more do you honestly want from a NASCAR race? You had a long green flag runs, fuel mileage, where strategy played a hand and not the yellow flag. We had a wreck, I guess, for the fans' excitement, right? Some people watch to see the wrecks. You had a bad one. I'm glad Alex Bowman's okay. But you had the best cars were up front most of the day. Hamlin, Buescher, Gibbs fought his way back. Bubba, Larson, and then William Byron and Hocevar were up front for most of the race. And then obviously like 3 of them had issues and fell back. But that was the driver had that thing where it was gas, whether it was strategy. So I think you can say, yes, it was the best in recent memory, but I mean, the races that Chris Buescher won, the ones that Larson had won back to back to back, I believe, in 2016, 2017 when he was with Ganassi. And then even Harvick just putting on absolute clinics here every single time he showed up. A lot like Phoenix, what he would used to do there. Just all great. And then so I think, yes, probably the best in recent bias memory. But I think you can argue that they almost always put on a show. And touching on, we talked about how the 2 date versus 1 date, right? And I know we always have this discussion, and I think what we saw today as a performance kind of inflates that discussion, really, because we saw everything we've ever wanted in a race. And I think that what's happened at Kansas last year with the photo finish. I think Kansas is one of the best tracks on the schedule. And then you get all excitement, all hype, and then Kyle Larson goes and puts belt to butt, and it really wasn't that great of a race. And then we're like, well, there was conversations Kansas should get 3 dates, right? And now you're at 2. It's like that's definitely enough dates. So I can agree with a couple of people like Ben Schneider, our own Ben Schneider too, mentions each track should have just probably 1 date, maybe besides Daytona. I think there are so many tracks on this schedule that are in NASCAR that are NASCAR sanctioned. I know we touched on Kentucky, even though it's a 1 groove track. Tanner will bust my balls about that. But in terms of like Chicagoland possibly coming back, there's so many great tracks that it would be cool to see them go a different place every single year. But Michigan really makes a case that getting rid of the other race, just I don't know if that was the best idea, but there are so many dang tracks out there that maybe it is for the better. So I guess, does it deserve the 2 dates? Yeah, probably, but would I sacrifice a Michigan date, like they only have one, to see Chicagoland come back, to see Kentucky possibly come back, pretty much anything NASCAR or SMI owns, right? Because that's what they would bring back inevitably. Yeah, I think I would sacrifice it, but this was one of the best races of the 2025 season, I think, without a doubt, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the better races of 2025. I know in the chat room, Chuck says, in his opinion, it was for him the best super speed race I could think of recently as well. And of course, agree we've had enough tracks, one date in each place. And I think that really is a great point because that could open up the schedule for tracks I feel could rotate dates. I mean, I know we're going to Mexico City. We'll be talking about that. Would that really be a track we want to go to every year or maybe every other year just because of the travel logistics? There's rumors about Brazil being on there. I can't imagine that being a every year. That has to be like every other year.
Maybe
And
the
then even tracks nearby. We know a good example, Portland has the Xfinity Series. Rumors that someday they want the Cup. Might be a good alternating track as well, too. A lot of potential changes when it comes to NASCAR. And of course, NASCAR now they got Steve as the commissioner. They got a new president. Who knows what's going to happen? But overall, I think Michigan for sure keep one date. This was without a doubt, I think one of the best races we've seen in the year. And I can't wait for next year. It's just a bummer we don't come back, but at the same time, it's like, hey, we got more races, new tracks, a very diverse schedule. And of course, that diversity continues next race weekend, Mexico City. And my goodness, for the teams, they're starting their long haul to get down there. The haulers making the long drive to get from Brooklyn, Michigan to Laredo, Texas, and then, of course, enter Mexico. From Texas to Mexico, what they're looking at, 700 plus mile drive. And then everyone else will be getting there about Wednesday, Thursday. This is, of course, the first points race for the Cup Series there. The Xfinity Series, about 17 years ago, used to race there. Did a few years, they'll be back. Then, of course, the Cup Series making their debut race down there now. Considering the logistics for the teams, this is a challenge because you don't have the benefit of let's go to Charlotte, put in a new car, take some notes from Michigan, apply, go to the next track. A lot of them are just going straight from Michigan to Texas, Texas down south. We saw them loading up even the backup cars early. So for a team that's running up front, they have to be feeling pretty good. But then you got teams towards the back that are, oh, we're off. Now you're going straight to Mexico. And then let's remember, after Mexico, you're going to Pocono, Pennsylvania. So could this stretch be a challenge for those teams that are struggling and they're hitting it at the wrong time? And then at the same time, benefit those teams that are getting the momentum.
It's interesting, right? I want to touch on that, and then I want to rant a little with you. But yeah, I don't think it's honestly going to be a continuation. I think these tracks are so drastically different that we're going to probably see the teams that do really well at like a road course or street course, those types of tracks, right, are going to do really well on Sunday. And I think the teams that, even if I'm trying to think of like guys, I think someone like even Hamlin might be one of the few that will build that momentum and go to a track he might not be the best at. But then you look at the other guys, too, that finished up front. Chris Buescher is arguably the best road course racer in this sport at this given time, especially finally got his win at Watkins Glen. I was there in attendance, the battle with SVG, who is also going to be someone who has not been great at all this season, but when it comes to these types of tracks, it's almost a guarantee. Unless something goes wrong, he'll be up in the top 5. I think we're going to see, honestly, drastically different. Like, I don't think somebody with momentum like Bubba Wallace, he's not really a road course guy. He'll be the first person to tell you that. I don't think he's going to be excited for that one, even though they have 2 top 6 finishes in a row. I don't think that momentum really can carry there. That's just the way it goes in this sport. But I want to touch on, so that pretty much that was to answer your question. I want to touch on the logistics and how this is arguably the stupidest thing we've seen Not Mexico City. I'm 100%, even more than 100% if it's possible, excited for this race. It sucks that it's on Prime because I really would have loved this to be on Big Fox. Just what they're able to do with this, and then the marketing they've been doing has been incredible, whether it's mainly Suarez, but with the classrooms with Bowman and Priest and the other drivers. Just that's awesome. However, the logistical situation of this is complete and utter stupid, because why are we going from one of the most northern possible tracks that you race at to the most southern you can possibly go across the border of the United States of America and Mexico? And then you're going back up to Pocono? What the heck? Like, seriously, that does not make any sense. They spent so much time on this schedule. You could have thought that maybe if I know things are set and out of our control, but if they could have had Texas or something that was not a day and 10-hour drive away over 700 plus miles, even more, just stupid. And then you see, I know I mentioned Father's Day is a big example, but you have drivers too now, obviously. And then I want to also touch on, but I wouldn't want it on Big Fox. Actually, I think coverage, I wish Amazon Prime was actually on cable, because they've been doing such an incredible job. Fox is clearly show they are not doing a good job. And I know Ben and Brandon will touch on it Monday with the Truck Series and certain things that are said on broadcast that shouldn't be said. But anyway, in terms of Father's Day coming up, you have drivers like Denny Hamlin expecting Jordan to have a baby at any given moment. Bubba Wallace with Bex has his first Father's Day. With the logistics, these guys aren't going to be able to spend it with their families and kids. You've seen interviews where a lot of them, and then Tyler Reddick just had Rookie and his new baby boy as well. Not going to be able to have the families go down to Mexico City because of the logistics and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate, and that sucks. But when you look at just the whole Father's Day thing, I think that's going to be a big thing with no family there. It's going to give a weird, eerie vibe, but I think it's going to be exciting at the same time. But just putting these truck drivers through having to do this is just outrageous, honestly. I think NASCAR, for as many people as they have probably making the schedule, I think they could have done a better job with that. And I think next year, if Mexico City stays on the schedule, which I think it is, that would be very smart to put Texas, if Texas keeps the date, right next to it, or something down in the southern area of the United States of America, because it doesn't make any sense. So sorry about the rant. Just saying, I know I keep apologizing. I know I'm not supposed to or whatever, but you kind of know what I mean. It's just, why the heck are we going from Michigan to Mexico City to Pocono? Just no, it would have been smarter if Echo Park Speedway was after this, because it makes geographical sense. NASCAR does not make any geographical sense. And it reminds me of Formula One too, when they say, oh, we want to be zero emissions or low emissions, and then they bounce back and forth between 5 different countries in 5 days or 5 races. It's like, what the heck is going on? So that's how I feel.
I mean, a lot of good points there. One of the things, as you mentioned, Chuck saying Denny's wife better drop that baby ASAP, because I know they were talking about last week how they had a driver on call in case Denny Hamlin had to go. Coming from Mexico City, oh, that is a long trek. So, I mean, it is just one of those deals. Very excited about seeing Mexico City hosting the Cup Series. Very excited about the race, but I get it. Always, sports want to have something to claim, like, oh, this is the longest season out of any professional sport, sticker ball or anything, NASCAR. Okay, we get that. But is it to the point where it's too long? I mean, as people talk about one race date per track, couldn't we do something easier for the drivers instead of this? Because just going from Michigan to Mexico to Pocono, that is a lot of driving. I'm hoping next year, especially since there's rumors of what's going to happen with the All-Star race, could North Wilkesboro maybe be a points race? That would make sense to me. Put it North Wilkesboro after Mexico, if Mexico's around the same spot in June. But even then, Father's Day, that's a big deal too. I think the drivers would really like to have their families there too. So it just, of course, you got to consider the schedule in Mexico City and that track facility, what's going on. So a lot of variables there, but we'll see how everything all shapes up. Good points, gents. We'll be back. And of course,
Thank you, Chuck.
We got a lot of racing to cover. MotoGP, Supercars. This concludes our NASCAR part. So before we let you go, Matthew, of course, encourage everyone to check out Grid Network TV. Article will be up there. What was your shining moment from this race weekend?
Oh, it's tough. Gosh, I'm trying to think. So I guess if I want to touch on, I think I have two, honestly. One of them is definitely for this specific one that we talked about is Denny Hamlin, just the Hamlin family, obviously, what they do, and then Toyota and Gibbs, all them just having great runs. But Hamlin being able to have 701 career start, he's now the 10th driver in NASCAR history to win after his 700 start. He's 1 for 2, so he has the highest win percentage of 50% right now after number 700. Just him being able to have a consecutive another top 3 finish. And then obviously Jordan Fish, his fiance, giving birth to his first boy, who I'm sure is probably going to be a race car driver in 20 years when we're going to be having conversations about that. That's really exciting. And I know you guys are going to touch on, obviously, MotoGP and Supercars, but I think the biggest one to me, I'm going to probably steal either yours or Kobe's, is I think Ryan Wood winning his first career race. Giving me a pick a winner point was great, right? But no one gives a crap about that. Except me, obviously. But Ryan Wood being able to do what he did and get that done and then almost had it again and just had a mechanical failure. I believe his suspension failed. That's just honestly the biggest deal of this whole weekend is a first career winner in motorsport. And especially in a series like Supercars where it's very top heavy, I feel. So, yeah, shout out Ryan Wood, shout out Denny Hamlin and the whole entire family. Those are my two shining moments of the race weekend.
And thank you so much, Matthew, for your shining moments. Also, let's add Billy Sellers. Hello, guys from North Carolina. First time looking in. Welcome, Billy. Subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs right here on the Grid Network. And then Denver with an interesting comment. Mexico City, hostility towards American base. What's going on? Of course, the geopolitics. I know, especially when we had the Final Four hockey tournament going on with the United States, Canada, you could see the politics had really enlightened, lit a matching out rivalry. People were talking about in the media. At the end of the day, though, when the players were all done, nothing but respect. I think for the fans of Mexico, especially they got NASCAR Mexico Series, I think it's going to be on the minds. I mean, it's in the news all the time, but I think they're going to see it's like these drivers are here, their athletes are going to put on a great race. And I think the hospitality, as always, is going to be welcoming. And I think it's going to be a fun event for everyone. And of course, NASCAR trying to make relations, broaden their scope and their audience with the fan base in Mexico. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch. And of course, we'll be recapping that next race weekend.
Yeah, and before I go, I want to thank everyone for tuning in for the NASCAR port. Check out my story, gridnetworktv.com, when it's uploaded. Just want to say for the Mexico City comment, Daniel Suarez and Andres Perez de Lara, the two Mexican drivers going to be there. That's going to be the most exciting thing that you'll see this year is just support that the Mexico fans are going to give those two drivers. And I really wish we saw Checo Perez or Pato O'Ward or even one of the Mexico City drivers. I think Garcia is one of them. Ruben Garcia has been incredible. Just I wish they could have gotten a chance to, and I hope this really builds the momentum in the ratings, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, thank you guys for having me on the show. Hopefully you check out gridnetworktv.com with the Denny Hamlin story coming to you guys shortly.
Denny Hamlin story coming to you shortly on the Grid Network TV website. Right now, we're going to bring in Kobe Lameth for the MotoGP race weekend recap.
Yeah, we do have some bike racing to talk about this weekend. The Aragon race weekend saw a clean sweep from no other than Marc Marquez. Led every session, won the sprint race, the Grand Prix. So a perfect weekend for Marc. He has a 32-point lead over his brother Alex Marquez, also 93 points ahead of Pecco Bagnaia. Joe, what was this the weekend that proved Marc Marquez has to make mistakes for anyone to claim the championship this year?
Yes, this was the race weekend I think a lot of us saw coming where Marc Marquez was unstoppable. He went out there, led every session, fastest in qualifying, The sprints, he's undefeated. We got to remember the races he didn't win, especially Coda. He was leading, crashed out, making those mistakes. When he's not making those mistakes, he is just unstoppable. And overall, with the points lead he has, especially over Pecco Bagnaia, I mean, that's his teammate on the same equal equipment. And he's that far behind. Really, the only way Marc Marquez could be defeated is if Marc Marquez beats himself by making mistakes. He's at that point, I really feel, where he has Alex Marquez, if he continues his strong start to the year, having good finishes, he could capitalize on those mistakes, keep it close. But I just think the Factory Ducati team, Marc Marquez himself, they have the upper hand, the experience, the equipment. They're going to start pulling away, I think, and it's just a matter of when it happens, not if it happens.
Yeah, Marquez and the Ducati factory team seem to be as close to perfect, as they can possibly be. I know he hasn't been perfect, all year round, but for the most part, they've been as close, which is, a really good thing. And I have to agree. I think in order for someone to take this championship this way from Marc Marquez, he probably need to slide off the bike and get injured or just beat himself, as you said. And given his recent history of being injured, hopefully he will avoid that, because that was not a pleasant time in Marc Marquez's career. And he finally starting to look like the Marc Marquez that we all knew and loved, before he ran into a string of injuries that really kept him out of contention for a few years. And after Silverstone, news came out about Jorge Martin's intentions to leave Aprilia, and Aprilia's best finishing rider at Aragon was Marco Bezzecchi in 8th place. And the three of us, myself, Matt White, Joshua Burtz, we've already said our thoughts on the subject of Jorge Martin on last week's episode of Grid Tonight. But Joe, are you in agreement with the Grid Tonight crew that Jorge Martin made a big mistake by deciding, that, hey, I don't want to be with Aprilia anymore, and he's further damaging his reputation? Because it's funny, as soon as, he put out that statement saying he wants to be released by Aprilia at the end of the year and, try to find a new home, it seemed like Aprilia has certainly stepped it up since then.
Yes, Aprilia has stepped it up. I mean, just the timing. The statement came in after Aprilia gets the win at Silverstone. I really feel, more than anything, as everyone had said, Jorge Martin is really hurting his reputation, hurting what people view as his character. I mean, I know Joshua Birch on Grid Tonight went extensively into his racing history from Moto2, Moto3, up the ranks to MotoGP, what he has done. To have your series champion do this, the defending champion, I just do not see this as a win for MotoGP at all. And I think this is going to lead to what people remember of his championship, of Jorge Martin being a very disappointing series champion for the series. I mean, you look at what riders like Marc Marquez has done, Pecco Bagnaia, of course, the greats like Valentino Rossi. Even you put in there Fabio Quartararo. When they were the defending champion, they raced out there hard. Quartararo would know with Yamaha they had some struggles. Juan Mir, Suzuki. Of course, Suzuki later head on out. But they stuck it out. I mean, Quartararo still with Yamaha. Mir still with Honda. And then you have Jorge Martin. He doesn't even get to race with Aprilia. I'm out because I have this in my contract. Traditionally, that would be in your contract, because if you were racing and the bike was just absolutely nothing, you're not going anywhere. Okay, I'm going to go to a satellite team with another manufacturer. Aprilia is starting to show something again. I mean, Aprilia is not down in the dumps. I mean, they could rebound. This is still a very long season where there's a lot of races. The sprint races, I mean, that essentially doubled the season's length from past years. I really think Jorge Martin made a big mistake, and I agree with what Josh was thinking. Maybe he's going to go back to Premac again, because you can't go factory to factory. You got to look at those independent teams. And those independent teams, especially Premac, they might be like, hey, we'll welcome you back. But overall, I just think this was a big mistake. And Jorge Martin, whereas other drivers have, riders we've seen have the championship to do such a move, I just don't think Jorge Martin is at that level, because if it wasn't for the championships, we'd be talking about a rider that king of the sprints, but then makes those mistakes, crashes out, and I feel like this just did not help him at all with anybody.
Yeah, really not helpful at all. And as I mentioned, Joe, we went really into detail about this on the Grid Tonight show, and and if you want to hear about it yourself, go find our last week's episode of Grid Tonight. I think the section was titled Aprilia versus Jorge Martin. Because of the standoff that's going on between them. We talked about how awkward it's going to be moving forward if Jorge Martin gets healthy enough to ride the Aprilia bike later in the year. It's going to be real awkward for them because Jorge Martin's going to be working with a team you don't want to be with, and then the team you're going to have to work with a rider, who clearly doesn't want to be there, and then that just makes it an uncomfortable situation for all parties involved. And I said last Wednesday night that they're just going to have to find a way to coexist the rest of the year, until this partnership is over, because if Jorge Martin is not going to be happy there, why would you keep him around? And given the progress we've seen from the Aprilia bike this year, still not on the level of Ducati, but it seems like Aprilia's starting to get a little bit closer to Ducati. And if they continue to develop their bike, who knows, where they could be in the next year or so. I know we got a regulations change coming up, and we could see a massive change there. And for most people, I've seen, like drivers or riders who've been like champions or whatever, who had to, like, say, go to a less competitive situation. Some of them, they'll suck it up and, ride it out until, something better comes along. And just because Jorge Martin is just a one-time MotoGP world champion, I'll just be honest, Joe, that doesn't make him better than anybody else.
Exactly.
So why is your situation different than all the others we've seen? I remember when Michael Waltrip Racing shut down, and that's when Clint Boyer had to spend time at Harry Scott Motorsport. You saw how frustrated he was, because that was a situation he wasn't used to. He was used to being on a car that was competitive, capable of finishing the top 5, top 10, competing for wins and all of that. And then here he is, running for a team. You're battling for to finish inside the top 30 every weekend. A top 25 or even a top 20 is like a win. And then he went on to race at Stewart Haas Racing after that. Before he ended up retiring from driving altogether. So sometimes you just have to suck it up and make the best of the situation. I think in this situation, that probably would have been the smart move for Jorge Martin. I just want to know who in the world is his management team, like who is advising him to make these decisions, because it just doesn't seem smart at all. I wonder if he has the same management team that Alex Palou had, his fellow countryman, because Alex Palou almost ruined his whole career with with the incident when he wanted to sign with McLaren, when they didn't say what program he was going to be a part of. He was hoping to eventually be a McLaren F1 driver, but if that slot was available, he was going to race with it seemed like he was going to race with the Arrow McLaren IndyCar team. And if that had fallen into place, and he ended up leaving Ganassi and all of that, we wouldn't be talking about Alex Palou, as has been on the track to be one of the best IndyCar drivers of all time on IndyCar Mount Rushmore, as it seems like that he's going on. So I'm afraid Jorge Martin could be making a huge mistake here. Alex Palou just got lucky, that Chip Ganassi, was willing to take him back, and repair, any hurt feelings. It seems like, with Palou and Ganassi over in the IndyCar side, that they're perfectly fine. But when all this come about, they were not friends at all, and it seemed like a really tense situation. Palou just got lucky in his case. I'm not sure if Martin will get lucky.
Yeah, I don't think Martin's going to get lucky. I mean, it was just not a smart move. And like you said, one championship, and really came down to those sprint races, because it's the first time the rider who got the most wins in the season, not to mention the first time ever in MotoGP, a rider with more than 10 wins did not get the championship. It's not like he dominated and pulled a Marc Marquez from back in the day. He just came down to the last race weekend. We'll see what happens. And, of course, any further news when it comes to MotoGP, right here on the Grid Network. Subscribe, hit that bell icon, because we'll be reporting on it on Grid Tonight with Kobe, Joshua Birch, and Matt White. And, of course, Matt White, Grid Endurance Performance Index on one of his series to watch, of course. The Repco Supercar Series, Perth 440, Super 440 is in the books. It was a weekend mostly dominated by one driver, Triple Eight Racing, Red Bull Apple Racing's driver, Broc Feeney. We saw Feeney take 2 of the 3 races, with Ryan Woods winning his first race and the first race of the weekend. Now, Feeney leads Perth with a 72-point lead in the championship over his teammate Will Brown as the Repco Supercar Series prepares for the Darwin Triple Crown, the Northern Territory in 2 weeks. When we compare the two teammates from Apple Red Bull Racing, you got Broc Feeney this year, 5 wins and a pole, while his defending series champion and teammate Brown only 1 win and 1 pole. So, Kobe, let's start out. Does Will Brown, the defending Repco Supercar Series champion, need to step up his performance to defend the championship against his much younger teammate?
Well, it's safe to say that Broc Feeney is the number one driver right now at AAA. And just looking at the teammate comparison, 5 wins on a pole compared to 1 win and 1 pole. If I'm Will Brown right now, I have to be really frustrated to see how badly my teammate is outperforming. I mean, Will Brown hasn't been bad at all. For goodness sake, he's only a spot behind Feeney in the championship standings. So Will Brown is still in a good place. He's been relatively consistent, but Broc Feeney, he's been more dominant. He's been a little bit more consistent than Will Brown has, and I do think that number 87 team needs to step things up as we get deeper into the season, because we're going to have a lot more supercars races, in the next couple of months ahead. And I think that whatever hasn't been working compared to Broc Feeney's team, I think they need to figure something out and really step it up, because right now it seems like Broc Feeney is starting to pull away and put his foot down, as the one driver that all of these other competitors are going to be chasing for this year's championship. So yeah, Will Brown definitely needs to step it up.
Will Brown looking to step it up. Now, one driver who wants to step it up after what started as like something really great and then not looking good, Ryan Woods, one of the most controversial moments in Perth. This occurred on race 3 when we saw James Golden and the race 1 winner, Ryan Wood, collide. From the highlight of winning your first race, first time in your career in the Supercar Series, to then the low of watching a good points day disappear when he and Golden made contact and went off the track, we are still, Kobe, have 5 race weekends and 11 scheduled races until the Supercar Series debut its version of the playoffs, which it will be called the finals. And although we still have a few months until we see the new playoff system, the series has started to talk about the point situation as that closes up and intensifies. And also, we've already said, Feeney, he is leading the points, fighting for the championship. And of course, the fight for the Sprint Cup after the incident in race 3. Woods is now on the bubble in 10th, and Golden is the first driver out 11th right now. Woods was just furious, fuming, angry with Golden after the incident and said he expected better from a more experienced driver. Golden said that when he made contact with Wood, it broke his steering, which caused him to go hard right into Wood and run them both off track. Golden views this as just a hard racing incident. Do you agree with James Golden that this was just hard racing, or do you put blame on one of the drivers over that?
Yeah, it really seemed like it was just one of those incidents, where just 2 young guys are going for one spot, and it just ended in tears in this situation. And Ryan Wood, as Matthew was saying earlier, got to feel happy for the young guy to go out there and get his first win in supercars. These supercars races are extremely hard to win, and for him to do what he did, go out there and get that first win, major statement win. I thought that was a real special moment for him. Thought that was, obviously great for his racing career, and he obviously wanted to capitalize on this momentum, because in race 3, with the timing of the safety car there, put him in the catbird seat, to potentially get a podium finish, maybe possibly challenge Broc Feeney. It didn't look like he was going to be able to get to Broc at the moment, but at least maybe contend for a podium finish, or at least have a really good points day, as you said. But unfortunately, contact with James Golden ended that, ruined the race for both drivers. And I do understand why Ryan Wood was upset, because that's a lot of points off the board. And Joe, I know you also said that, the series that I've already talked about the playoffs, in the point situation, the top 10 in points, and that includes the Sprint Cup, and Endurance Cup champions. They're going to be, and they're going to earn a postseason berth. And looking at how many races we have to go until this Supercars playoffs, since got the 3 races, the Hidden Valley Raceway, the Darwin Triple Crown, got the 3 street races, in Townsville. Then got Queensland Raceway back on the schedule. Got 3 events there. And then you got 2 Queensland. That's going to be the finale for the Sprint Cup. So if Broc Feeney's at the top of the Sprint Cup standings after the final race in Queensland. He's going to be the Sprint Cup champion. That's an automatic playoff berth. And then, got the 2 Endurance Cup events, the Bend Enduro, and then the Great Race of Australia, the Bathurst 1000. That's also another playoff berth on the line. So technically, Joe, here's the real interesting thing playoff-wise, just getting off subject here. If someone who's currently outside of the top 10 in points, let's say, goes out there, wins the Bend, wins Bathurst, you may be 15th in points right now, but you're in the playoffs then. So that's something that could, really turn your season around. And as we saw the situation with Brody Kostecki last year, if he'd done, well enough in the endurance race, to be at the top of the enduro standings after 2 races, we might be, Brody might have been able to, salvage something this season last year, and get into the playoffs and try to defend his title in what was a lame duck year last year at Aragon. So that's another interesting angle to consider there. But looking at all the points that were lost, by the disappointing results for Golden and Ryan Wood, it may not mean anything now because, as I said, you got 3 races per weekend at Darwin, Townsville, and Queensland, and then you have the 2 enduros. Think about all things that can happen between now and then. When you count the points at the end of the day, when it comes to who's in 10th place, who's in 11th, the first one out, this might be the one race where you can look at it and be like, wow, if it wasn't for that collision, James Golden might be in the playoffs. If it wasn't for this collision, Ryan Wood might not be in the playoffs. Right now, it doesn't really mean a lot in the grand scheme of things, but once it really comes down to it and the season develops more, it might turn out to be an even bigger deal later on than it is right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially the point with the endurance races. 2 big races, of course, one of the Bathurst 1000, the Crown Jewel. Just the thought that it's like, okay, if you have a good effort in that race, win that race, and then another race, and you could be in the finals, it almost makes me think like, okay, you almost adding that extra importance level to the Crown Jewel race, of course, with the Bathurst 1000, which sort of like that, but I know it's what you're saying, though. Like, you could just have a lousy season. Brody Kostecki, a perfect example. He could have been in the finals. Denver, looks like the new Supercar CEO is looking at markets at Southeast Asia Regional Series for supercars. I believe I saw that was a speedcafe.com, something about the Supercar Series looking into that. And then Supercars is becoming more a play on the season with the new format and letting the drivers sort themselves out a bit. Sounds like another series that also has a playoff system as well, too. So we'll be following the Supercar Series throughout the year. And, of course, the big one, the Bathurst 1000, much later in the year. Cannot wait for that. Kobe, let's talk about the series where they also have their first race, their Crown Jewel, Rally Monte Carlo, but this time, Rally Italy World Rally Championship.
Yeah, and once again, I got to pick a winning point because Sebastian Ogier won Rally Italia Sardegna in Sardinia. His 5th win at this event. Tonic and Kali Rovanpera rounded out the podium with Elfyn Evans in 4th. Evans has a 25-point lead over the highest Hyundai driver in the points, Tonic, who is 4th in points. Rovanpera is 3rd and Ogier is 2nd, 20 and 19 points back respectively. Thierry Neuville, the defending World Rally champion, is 50 points behind after hitting a big rock in stage 5 while leading. He ended up retiring from the race, causing him to miss out on some very valuable points. So, Joe, do you think Neuville's title defense is looking more unlikely at this point?
Yeah, it's looking very unlikely. I am not convinced he's going to be able to defend it the way things are going. The season has not been that great for him. The Hyundai team just are one step behind Toyota Gazoo Racing. I mean, Toyota Gazoo Racing, when you look at what Sebastian Ogier has been doing, coming out here part-time, winning, Kali Rovanpera running strong, and then Elfyn Evans having a great season, leading the championship. Neuville, it looked like when he was leading, this could be the weekend, but then a rock, just bad luck, and he was done for. I mean, the fact that he's this far behind, we still got plenty of races, so he could catch up, especially with the power stage points and everything. But overall, I think it's probably you're going to need Elfyn Evans to just have the worst luck possible in the second half of the season, where he is just not bringing home the points, not doing that good. And then at the same time, Thierry Neuville needs to be having these great finishes, and I just don't see that, Kobe. I just feel like Neuville is very hit or miss if he has an average season, but Evans continues what he's doing, it's going to be game over and could be Evans' first championship.
Yeah, and for Elfin Evans, that would be a big deal if he ends up closing it off at the end of the year, because it seems like right now, Toyota Gazoo Racing, WRT, they're on a different level right now. I guess if we're making a MotoGP comparison, what Toyota's doing right now is what Ducati is doing over in MotoGP, because that's the car you want to be in, because Hyundai's is trying to do their best to catch up and all of that. But if I had to be in a car right now, I definitely want to be in one of those Toyotas. I believe the next race for World Rally Championship is going to be in the at the very end of the month, last week of June. It's going to be the Acropolis Rally Greece, which is another popular stop on the schedule. And with that said, let's take a look at our updated standings with the grid ranking.
Yes, week 10 of the grid ranking, and at the very top, no change. Alex Palou continues to lead, but we had plenty of changes in the top 10. One of the most notable ones, Sebastian Ogier, despite running part-time, he keeps going out there, keeps getting race wins, so he still manages to stay within the top 5 of the World Rally Championship grid rating, which takes the top 5 drivers or riders from their specific series, puts them all in the grid ranking. Somehow Ogier continuing on that streak. Now, of course, Elfin Evans, he slid down the standings, so this promoted Oscar Piastri up to 3rd place. Kyle Larson, Marc Marquez, both climbing up spots from Elfin Evans' slide. And, of course, Marc Marquez having that perfect race weekend, allowed him to climb up. Look at Broc Feeney coming up to 7th place. Denny Hamlin makes it into the top 10. And with Oliver Rowland, that means all 7 series in the grid ranking have a driver in the top 10. And one of the things I just find very interesting, Kobe, when we're looking at the grid ranking, one of the big things is top 10 finish rates, top 5 finish rates, podium finish rates. This far into this year, we still have 5 drivers that have a 100% top 10 finish. Now, of course, one of them is Sebastian Ogier, but he's running a part-time schedule. But you still have running full-time in World Rally, Elfin Evans, Autonic, 100% top 10 rate. Formula One, the other drivers, Oscar Piastri, who, of course, is leading the championship there, and Max Verstappen. That almost came to an end in Spain had he been just a little bit slower, and then that 10-second penalty would have kicked them out of the points. Out of those drivers, who is most likely to finish with a 100% top 10 finish rate?
Well, if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Oscar Piastri is, the best bet at the moment, because as we've talked about in our past Formula One segments, all throughout the year, he's I guess the words for him are cool, calm, and collected, the 3 C's for Oscar, because it seemed like nothing phases him. Even if there's a day, that's not going to, end up with a win, he can still, put the car, on the podium, get a good points finish inside the top 10. So I feel really confident in Oscar out of them all. With Max Verstappen, it seems like he's starting to get, real frustrated with the way the season's going. And as we've talked about, all throughout our shows last week, Max is sitting on the cuffs of a 1 race ban, which would obviously not be good for him. It would also be horrible for Red Bull, because, as I've said, I would not feel confident in Red Bull being able to score any points if Max Verstappen is not there. I feel like he's one of the only drivers who can consistently in the entire world who could potentially, who can consistently score points in that Red Bull car, because, Yuki Tsunoda's struggle. If they throw someone else in there, I have a feeling that they would struggle as well, and would be a real embarrassing weekend for Red Bull, especially if that suspension happens, at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, because you probably want to have your star Red Bull driver in that event. And I wonder how the Canadian Grand Prix this coming weekend is going to go for Max Verstappen, because he's going to have a huge target on his back. It will be interesting to see if some of the drivers try to get under his skin and try to force his way into a 1 race ban there, or Max's frustration gets too much, and maybe we see him crash out of a race there. So don't feel confident in him. And then, the WRC drivers, I feel like, just hit or miss, with those guys, obviously they do a really good job, but there's no telling, Neuville did, who's going to hit a rock, and slide down in the standings and all of that, very unpredictable. We've even seen some races, when OJ's, not on the top of his game as well. So I just have to pick Oscar Piastri. I think there's way too many variables, in the World Rally Championship, for a top 10 finish rate, to continue to go in there. And then Verstappen and all the pressure he's going to be under to try to get through the end of the month and let those penalty points expire. Well, at least a couple of them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see who all could do that. Of course, one of the last times we saw a driver top 10 finish rate in their series, 2023, Alex Palou. I mean, he's leading it right now. So, of course, Palou leading the grid ranking. And taking a look at the rest of the grid ranking. As you can see, the full grid ranking right there. 5 drivers or riders from each of the 7 series represented. And of course, that comes from each series individual grid rating. And then, of course, the top 5 makes it into the grid ranking. Next race weekend, it's going to be three of the big ones: Formula One, IndyCar, and NASCAR. And just very interesting, Cody, you got those 3 series across North America: Formula One in Canada, NASCAR in Mexico, and of course, IndyCar in the United States. And they're racing the oval, while the other 2 are on a road course. Very interesting race weekend for motorsports here.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And that's not the only thing going on. You got IndyCar at Gateway, Formula One in Montreal, NASCAR, Mexico City, highly anticipated event there. And you also have the 24 Hours of Le Mans going on in France. So if you love motorsports, you don't have to work next weekend. You're probably gonna go out Friday night and buy food for the weekend and sit back, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, because there's gonna be something on for you to consume. It's just gonna be an extremely busy, compact motorsports weekend in Indy cars and prime time as well. So you're gonna literally have motor racing on from morning, until the sun goes down. Yeah, basically sunrise to sunset. So next weekend is going to be extremely busy, and also the weeks that follow are going to be very busy in the endurance world as well. Now Matt White touched on it Wednesday night in the grid endurance performance, and that's you got the 3 big 24-hour races on 3 consecutive weekends, back to back to back. You got the 24 Hours of Le Mans next weekend. The following week, I believe you have the Nürburgring 24 hours, and after that, the 24 Hours of Spa. So a lot of racing, as the summer stretch heat up. And now it's time for our grid one shining moment from this racing weekend. And let us know down in the chat below, whether you're watching live or on replay, what's the one thing that stood out to you the most from all of the racing that we covered this weekend? Whether it was from NASCAR at Michigan, MotoGP at Aragon, Supercars in Perth, or World Rally Championship in Sardinia. And Joe, I'll let you go first. What's your one shining moment?
My shining moment is coming from the NASCAR Cup Series race at Michigan. And that's going to go to the drivers of the number 17, the 60, and the 6. All 3 RFK drivers finishing in the top 10. This season, it has been a struggle for Brad Keselowski in that number 16. But now it looks like maybe they're getting their thing going the right direction. A top 10 finish, some strong runs, avoiding the bad luck. That's a great thing. You got Ryan Preece, who has had some of the best finishes this year for that organization leading up to this race weekend in the playoff picture hunt. This was a driver where at the beginning of the season we were talking about questioning the move. Was Ryan Preece the best driver to pick to be in the 3rd spot of RFK? So far, he's delivering. And then Chris Buescher, I feel like he is starting to return back to a winning form. 2nd place today. If he could have a good run at the remaining ovals, I think he could be a winning contender. Of course, we know road courses, he does tend to like them. It'd be interesting to see how he does in Mexico, but of course, you got Sonoma there, Watkins Glen's coming, Chicago street course. That could be a little bit wild card, but for Chris Buescher, seeing him up towards the front again, I think he's showing the potential he has. And the fact that the history of RFK racing, of course, Roush Fenway racing, and before that, just Roush racing at Michigan, I have to say, this has to feel pretty good today to have all 3 cars in the top 10 finish compared to where they were months ago, where we're talking about what's going on. Well, I can tell you what's going on right now. RFK is coming to life, and I think they're going to have a good summertime series.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times, regardless of the series you're gonna see drivers and teams, have a slow start to the season. But once the summer stretch starts, you had some momentum going. You can really get on a hot stretch down the stretch. When it gets really important to put yourself in a position to potentially make the playoffs. Brad, rough start to the season. Probably needs to. Well, he definitely needs to. Probably get a win to get into the playoffs. Because that point deficit right now, probably unlikely to make it up. But with the way those cars are running, it might be sooner rather than later when we see that number 6 back in victory lane. And my one shining moment, I got to give it to a driver from Supercars, in his final season as a full-time driver. How about James Courtney getting the podium in race 3 in Perth? That was, quite a special moment for James, because before the race, they actually did a feature on him. I believe it was him and Jess Yates, they were like riding in the car, talking about life after supercars and all of that. And she was asking James, like, what does he plan to do when he retires? He said he would like to stay involved, in supercars in some way, but he said he doesn't really know if he wants to be a co-driver and all of that. He said it doesn't really appeal to him. He was basically talking about, just cold turkey leaving, and I'm just done, not going to do anything else. But he said he's going to wait and see how things go, at the end of the season. And maybe, he'll change his mind and be willing to come back as a co-driver. But James Courtney finally acting supercars, trying to help build up the Blanchard racing team, since they are one of the newer teams in supercars, to try to get that team, up and, performing better. And with the way to, when the safety car come out and all of that, James Courtney was in the prime position, to steal some track position there. And to his credit, held his own at the end to get a podium. And, James Courtney's, finished on the podium before. But why was this so special? Because it was the very first podium in the history of the Blanchard racing team. So that was, real special for the team. And James even admitted that he was very emotional, after scoring that podium, because, this is a team, that's, just trying to, survive right now in supercars, try to establish themselves. And nobody would have predicted that this car, and this team would have finished on the podium in a supercars race this year, especially, seeing, how the other car has been struggling. First he had Aaron Love, in the car as his teammate, then he got fired, and then they put Aaron Cameron in. And to Aaron Love's credit, Aaron Cameron has looked, just as awful as he did when he was in that car. So maybe that, proves that it's not necessarily the driver that's the issue. So Aaron Love probably feels a little bit better after seeing how the other Aaron has been going, and it hasn't been going much better. And for James Courtney to go out there and do what he did, I thought that was, a real special moment for him, real special moment for the entire Blanchard racing team, because, James Courtney's been around for a while, and it's certainly not going to be the same without him once he hangs up the helmet at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be different once he's not running full-time of supercars, familiar face. Overall, a couple great shining moments. And, of course, we still got some more ones to talk about in the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Grid Encore, Ben and Brandon will be back on the air, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, plus Arkham and NAR Series. Both of them are out in Michigan. They're going to be talking about that. And then, Grid Tonight. I know one of the topics that probably going to be talked about is, of course, the return of Dodge, Ram, Truck Series. Be sure to tune into Grid Tonight. Women in Motorsports will be previewing Formula One Academy, F1 Academy at Montreal. And then the big race weekend with F1, NASCAR, IndyCar at Gateway, Montreal for Formula One, and NASCAR in Mexico. Once again, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Link in the video description to invest in us through Patreon. We'll add your name to the leaderboard. Also, gridnetworktv.com. Matthew Bros' article will be posted up later on. And then, of course, cross social media at Grid Network TV for the Grid Ranking, the Grid Endurance Performance Index, and pick a winner. Still over 100 plus races this year. You could catch up to anybody, especially get on a hot streak of picking winner after winner after winner. For Kobe Lambeth, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.